So welcome to your class. So bago tayo magpatuloy sa inyong lesson, I want you to get a pen and a notebook for taking down notes. Magpakahusay! Welcome to your Lesson 1 on Video Production and Digital Photography. This is your Lesson 1, Knowing the Different Types of Film Genre. For your lesson outcomes, at the end of this lesson, you as a student will be able to first, learn how to categorize films, second, learn the basic elements of a narrative film, and third, identify the different types of film genre. Sir, saan po iikot ang pag-uusapan natin ngayong lesson na ito? So, here is our table of contents. First, we are going to talk about categorizing films. Second, elements of a narrative film. And third is the main types of film genre. As the famous saying goes, there are always two sides to a story. However, there are arguably limitless ways of telling a story. Why? In the case of Ryunosuke Akutagawa's short story, there are at least 7 sides, and that's just from a single story. Another example is in the short story In a Grove. This is adapted into the classic film Rashomon directed by Akira Kurosawa. One could take a single event and look at it from different perspectives, adding layer upon layer to the narrative as a whole. So it only proves that a short story or a story cannot only contain two sides, but it may contain multiple sides or multiple dimensions. The plot and the characters may be prevalently known as the vital parts in shaping up a good story, but it is also important to consider a story's other elements, such as the point of view, subject matter, themes, period, and narrative structure, among others. Thus, stories that have well-known conventions, tropes, and other similar qualities are categorized into a group. These are what we know as genres. In film, genres mostly evolve along with the advancement of technology to make movies. Back in the day, movies were simplistic, simple lamang, ranging from simple comedies, konting katatawanan lang, dramas, westerns, among others. Nowadays, sa ngayon naman, ang mga movie natin is about fantastical and extraordinary. And those are the norm. Yun yung mas patok ngayon, such as epic space adventures, fantasy folklore, superhero flicks, and full-length animated films using computer-generated imagery. The sky is not the limit. Movies go way beyond what we know to be familiar. You must be already itching to make movies so you can tell your very own stories and win Academy Awards and such, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Before we start learning and undertaking the process of video production and filmmaking, first, it is important to know what kind of story you desire to tell. And now, let us talk about our first topic, which is categorizing films. A movie, like any story, can be comprised of many elements which we distinguish and categorize into groups called film genres. Talking about films, films can be categorized in a dizzying number of ways, but for practical purposes, they are categorized between the following. Okay, the first is the purpose. Ano ba ang message nito? Ano ba ang propaganda? Ito ba ay popcorn or purely for entertainment? Pag sinabi nating popcorn, yun ay series or TV commercials. Basta yung mabibilis lang. Next one is rating. Ito ba ay rated G, PG, PG-13, R, NC-17 versus unrated? Ano po sir yung mga rated G, PG, PG-13? Yan yung mga restrictions sa mga manonood. Yung hanggang kailan lang or hanggang anong edad lang ang pwedeng manood ng palabas na ito versus unrated. Ano po yung unrated? Yung bawal sa mga bata talaga. Pang matatanda lang. Next one is type. Is it local or domestic versus foreign? Pag sinabi nating local or domestic, dito lang sa Pilipinas. Pag sinabi nating foreign, ito ay mga movies or films sa ibang bansa. The fourth one is the visual presentation. Sir, ito po ba ay ano po yung 2D and 3D or stereoscopic? Yun yung mga type ng films. Pag 2D, flat lang. Pag 3D, yung parang damang-dama mo talaga, kitang ramdam na ramdam ng mata mo na parang totoo yung pinapanood mo. Next is quality. A list, higher budget mainstream versus B-list to Z-list, lower budget, more experimental. Pag sinabi nating A-list, pag pinag-uusapan natin ng quality, ang A-list ay meron siyang higher budget at mainstream. Pang buong bansa ito. Versus B-list to Z-list, lower budget lang, but more experimental. Next one is the length. Ito ba ay full length versus short? Pag sinabi natin full length, dito papasok yung mga movie. And pag sinabi natin short, ito lang yung mga series, mga drama sa hapon, mga ganun lang. And basis in reality, kung ba yun or non-fictional. Pag fictional, hindi makatotohanan. Pag non-fictional, makatotohanan. So class, note this. Film genres are the categorization of various forms of film based on consistent, recurring, and familiar filmic patterns, techniques, and conventions. The following are important when grouping films into a certain genre: story, plot, narrative events, structure, characters, motifs, styles, themes, messages, familiar icons, and characterization. So dito, sinasabi lang na if you are to group films into a certain genre, mamaya pag-uusapan natin kung ano ba yung mga genre, mahalagang i-consider natin ang story, plot, narrative events, structure, characters, motives, styles, themes, messages, familiar icons, and characterization. Now this, makinig. Films cannot usually be grouped exclusively into a sole genre. So ang mga films daw ay hindi mo basta-basta maigugrupo sa iisang genre. Most, if not all of the films released are a combination of two or more genres and are called hybrids. So ang isang film, pag nagkaroon niya ng isa, dalawa, or higit pa na genres, yan ay ang tawag na dyan ngayon ay hybrid. So an example is the romantic comedy, which is now more popularly called the rom-com for short. The horror comedy is another example that has experienced a rise in popularity recently. Other examples of hybrid type genres are the following: science, fiction action adventure, documentary comedy, or mockumentary, and the action comedy. Now this, films cannot usually be grouped exclusively into a sole genre. So ang mga films daw ay hindi mo maigugroup ng basta-basta sa isang genre. Most, if not all of the films released are a combination of two or more genres and are called hybrids. So pagka one, two, or more genres ang na-involve sa isang film, tatawagin natin siyang hybrid film. So ano po sir ang example nito? An example is the romantic comedy, which is now more popular, called the rom-com for short. The horror comedy is another example that has experienced a rise in popularity recently. Other examples of a hybrid type genres are the following: science, fiction action adventure, documentary comedy, or mockumentary, and the action comedy. Now, before going to the main types of film genres, punta naman tayo sa second topic natin. This is the elements of a narrative film. Again, elements of a narrative film. One defining component to them is, you guess it, a narrative. Narrative films are also called fictional films. Okay, take note of this. Narrative films are also called fictional films. They stand in contrast to documentary films which mainly present information. So ito daw ay kabaliktaran ng mga documentary films, yung makatotohanan. So pag sinabi nating fictional, ito ay hindi makatotohanan. More on imagination. Narrative films are mainly defined by two things: the story being presented and its narrative discourse, or how the story is told. Take note of this. The story is basically defined as a series of events, characters, and action represented within a given setting of time and place, or a world of cause and effect. The narrative discourse is mainly evident in the strategies of presentation, specifically when the camera is used to present different perspectives and depths. This allows the viewer to be immersed in the world of the story by actually showing the faces, the actions, the movements, and the events happening. In contrast, the situations and events presented in literary fiction can only be imagined. Okay, so basically ang sinasabi lamang doon, again, a narrative film or a fictional film are those films that are imagined. Lahat ng nangyari ay hindi makatotohanan. Lahat ng nangyari is a world of cause and effect. Okay. So there are lots of styles and flourishes to be made in the narrative discourse of a film. So marami daw pwedeng gawin, style, at pwede pang i-enhance pag gumagawa ng isang narrative discourse of a film. Everything depends on what the director of the film wants to achieve with the story. Nakadepende lahat sa director. These different styles can be categorized through the recurring film elements. So dito napapasok ang elements of the film. Okay, we have the theme. Involves the issues, topics, or concepts around which the story revolves. So, saan ba iikot yung issue? Ano ba ang issue? Ano ba ang topic? Ano bang meron? Ano bang pag-uusapan? Doon papasok ang tema. Okay, so next one is setting. The environment where and when the story takes place. Saan ba isushoot ito? Saan ba magaganap? Ito ba ay magaganap sa bayan? Ito ba ay magaganap sa bukid? Mga ganon. So mood. This is the emotional tone of the story. Ang mood ba ng film na ito ay masaya? Ang mood ba ng film na ito ay paghinagpis or pagkatuwa? Next one is the plot. This is the sequence of events. Dito napapasok yung pagkakasunod-sunod ng events. Ano ba ang takbo ng istorya? Una, ito ang mangyayari. Pangalawa, pangatlo, at ang pangwakas. Okay. So basically, again, ang sinasabi lamang doon ay ang narrative film or a fictional film is presented in a literary fiction and those. At ngayon, papasok na tayo sa ating last topic, which is the main types of film genres. Okay, so take note of every genre that we will discuss. First is the action or adventure. This is exemplified by high-energy scenes. So pag sinabing high-energy scenes, nandyan ang action or adventure. Sir, ano nagaganap dito? May suntukan, meron siyang barilan, may adventure, may pupuntahan silang bundok, may mangyayaring masama, may mangyayaring maganda. Doon papatak ang action or adventure. Next one is comedy. This has one priority, to make you laugh. So ano po ang purpose ng comedy? Ikaw ay patawanin ng patawanin. So next one is drama. This is serious in nature and is either plot or character driven. So ang drama, pag nagaganap ang drama, ito ay serious in nature. Parang real life ito. Ito ay nakapokus minsan sa plot, kung ano yung takbo ng istorya, or sa character, kung gaano ipinapakita ng character ang kanyang emosyon. Ito naman, we have horror or suspense. This is designed to provoke one strong emotional response from the viewers or the fear. Okay, so kalimitan, hindi lahat ng tao gusto ito, horror. Kasi nga naman, ang design nito ay takutin ang mga manonood. Next one is the westerns. This can be identified through familiar frontier, America period, or cowboy elements. So yung mga nakabihis ng cowboy, those are westerns. Okay? Crime and gangsters. This deals with shady characters involving sinister actions. So pag ito yung mga characters ay mysterious types, mga gangsters, or those stories or films that involves crime, dito papatak yon story na yon. Okay, the detective or mystery. This revolves around the protagonist unraveling a particular mystery, which is the central aspect of the plot. Okay, the central aspect dito or ang tinitingnan dito ay iyong character na kung saan ang character ay may iniimbestigahan, may hinahanap, may sinosolve. Maikakategorize natin siya as a detective or mystery films. Next one is the science fiction. This deals with futuristic science and technological concepts around which the plot revolves. Pagka ang films ay naglalaman or ang tema niya ay futuristic, masyadong hindi natin ma-imagine or mangyayari pa in the future, we can categorize it as a science fiction film. Next one is the fantasy. This often has the elements of myth, magic, wonder, and the extraordinary. Pag nga may myth, may mga wonder, may mga magic, yan. Basta makakita kayo ng magic, may nagmamagic, pwede natin siya makategorize as fantasy films. Next is chick flick or guy film. The characters in this type of film are those that viewers can relate to. So pag ikaw ay nakapanood ng isang movie na kung saan ang character doon ay kabataan na kagaya mo at yung mga nararanasan nila ay nararanasan mo din, doon papatak ang chick flick or guy film. Next is sports. The story of this type moves around the sport or sports setting. Pagka ang isang story ay umiikot lamang sa basketball, sa football, sa badminton, yung film na yun ay maikakategorize mo as a sports film. Next is a documentary. This presents and documents reality in different settings, situations, circumstances, and characters. Okay, ano po nagaganap sa documentary? Halimbawa, sa isang lugar. Dito, i-feature niya kung ano ba yung realidad, kung ano bang nangyayari doon, kung paano ba mamuhay, kung sino ba ang namumuhay doon. Last is the animated films. This uses animation and rendered cartoons to present the narrative. Basta na cartoons, merong cartooning, may drawing, colorful, ang mga characters ay nakadraw. We can categorize it as an animated films. At doon nagtatapos ang inyong lesson 1. So pag may hindi pa kayo naiintindihan or maintindihan, pwede nyong ulitin itong video na ito or pwedeng pumunta kayo sa discussion sa inyong lesson 1 sa inyong TechTeach account at makikita nyo doon yung ating discussion on text para mabasa nyo siya muli. So ano na sir gagawin namin after? So you have your activities, naka-upload na siya sa inyong class files. Ang gagawin nyo, i-download nyo ito at gagawin at pag natapos nyo na ito ay isasubmit nyo sa your files. Malinaw. So, yun lamang. Magandang araw.